Hello, screenwriters, and welcome to Writing for Screens. I have thoughts. Today's topic, constant change. My name is Glenn Gers, and I am the Chief Operating Everything for Writing for Screens, a teaching channel here on YouTube. I come to you live most Tuesdays and Thursdays for the past year, taking on different topics, sometimes going into script, sometimes going into things going on in the business, sometimes taking on a technical thing. Most of what I have to teach you, though, most of my valuable information that I have gathered in a 25-year career writing for movies and TV here in Los Angeles and on my way out of the business, I am trying to leave behind some lessons so that you don't have to go through the figuring it out for yourself that I did. I thought, I'd spent a lot of time trying to understand how this weird business and art works. I thought I would give some shape to those lessons, and they are here on my channel in the first 3 playlists. Let me give you a close-up of those. The first 3 playlists are Screenwriting Essentials, Screenwriting Tools, Skills, and Craft, and The Process, Being a Writer. There's also one about the business, but the main thing about these is that this is where I try to take what I understand about the business, what I've learned, and boil it down to little 10-minute lessons. Each lesson is on a topic. The topic is the title. It is also the thumbnail. So you can just browse the thumbnails and go, oh, look at that, genre, dramatic action, instinct, whatever it is. What I have to say, I tried to make really clear, put it here for all of you guys. So I urge you to take a look at those videos. They are free. They are available 24/7. And that's what I have to say about it. Hello, everyone. Hi, Lewis. Hi, Doug. Thank you very much. Glad to be back. 1 million diamonds. Hi, Blaine. Hello. Okay. So, hi, everybody. Good to see you. Yes, I was away for a couple weeks. I'm going to be away again, but I am back for a bit to do a week or two of these live streams, and I will talk more about that in a bit. But today we have a topic, and today's topic, appropriately enough, is constant change. And I'll tell you the reason that when I sat down, I thought, what am I going to do a live stream about this week? Hello, Atanu. Very nice to see you. This was partly on my mind because I was trying to explain what this job is, and it's not what you think, like what you do to get in, to learn the business, to learn the art of screenwriting is not what it is, and it's constantly changing. So when I started to think about this, I was thinking, how do I explain this thing that depending on where you are looking at it from, you see it very, very differently. Hello, Thumper. And that's really the key, because I think that's getting used to that conception, that it is not a monolithic temple of screenwriting that's got these columns and these porticos, and you could say, this has been there since time immemorial, since obviously screenwriting only has existed for 100 years. But the main thing is, even within its history, it has changed. But more important, within your experience of it, it is going to change. What you understand of what the point of it is and what the art of it is and what's good and bad, that is constantly going to be changing. Plus, you as a person are going to be changing. You are going to be changing as you learn and grow. The fact that you get better at something, or that you find something is that you want to do more within the art, all of those things are going to change that temple of screenwriting, that edifice in which you say, this is the greatness. It's gonna change. Partly this came about because I was thinking of recommending stuff. I was thinking, because I had recently done a thing about the legend of Rocky, the legend of Sylvester Stallone holding on to a script and refusing to let anyone have it unless he played the lead, and how that's a kind of misleading legend that is often taught. And so I looked at Rocky. I watched Rocky. I watched a bunch of movies recently because I was like, God, I haven't seen that in 20 or 30 years. And okay, now when you get to a point where like you haven't seen something for 20 or 30 years, it's really, really valuable to look again. Hi, Michael. Yes, indeed. Back we are. So I looked at a bunch of movies. Now, I am not recommending these movies. That is the point here. I am not saying that I recommend these. I'm saying these are interesting lessons for me about recommending, because Rocky is recommendable. It's good. It's a good movie, and you can learn a lot from it. However, what's really interesting about it is that there's a scene, the first scene with him, his first date with Adrian. It's painful. It doesn't look like it did in the 70s. The fact is that he's kind of manipulating and kind of coercing Adrian. The scene where she goes to his apartment, he's like, oh, just come in. And he's like, oh, just relax, and oh, just stay. And she's like, I want to leave. She says, I'm uncomfortable. I want to leave. And it was always charming to us how he saw through her uncomfortable moment and saw that she loved him and said, no, stay. And it's awful now. It's painful. It's bad. And this is a tricky thing because times have changed. The conventions of movie scenes have changed. The conventions of relations between men and women have changed. A lot of things have changed. Most for the better. But that means that some movie with legendary usefulness, like Rocky. Also, there was a movie that I saw. It's from the 60s called The Fortune Cookie by Billy Wilder. I am a worshiper of Billy Wilder. And The Fortune Cookie to me was a great movie, and I recently watched it for the first time in 30 years, and I can't recommend it. I mean, I can recommend it for anyone like me who's going to delve deep into 1950s and 60s movies, and there is a great deal to recommend it. But basically, it's so stylized in an ancient style that it's almost like Shakespeare or Chaucer. It's almost unrecognizable to the modern audience. And yet I loved it. So what does that mean? Is it bad? Has it gone bad? Have we changed? Or is simply that change is part of being an artist, recognizing that things are not some museum which is eternally still. That's not how art works. And that's really my point. Then there was this movie called Trouble in Mind, which was an indie film from the 80s that I truly loved. Once again, and I talked to a writer friend recently. He said, that's one of my favorites that I can't recommend. And it's true. And yet there's so much about it that is stylistically and artistically interesting, but in many ways it's a terrible movie. And the relationships between men and women are appallingly bad. Yet some of the performances are astonishingly good. Some of the style and cleverness of it is damn fine. The score is amazing. What are we going to do? What do we do with this weird thing? And what this thing that is change within art and life? And here's the thing. This is an old joke. It's an old joke, or perhaps an old truth. The only thing that is constant is change. And that's, obviously constant change is in itself an oxymoron. Constant and change, they can't be part of the same thing. You can't have things changing and be constant. And if they're constant, they can't change. So how is this constant change existing? And yet it does. That's the truth. The truth of life is that the only thing that is constant is change. The art is changing. The business is changing. So that's the tip. The tip I am trying to give you, the tool, the skill, is to recognize that the kind of work that you are doing, the thing that you are doing, is not trying to absorb and learn your place in this eternal museum of fixed values. It is, in fact, a constantly changing thing, which you are contributing your part to the flow. And if you are, frankly, a good artist, you're going to be changing and flowing too. And that is good. That it is difficult because you have to get used to uncertainty. You have to get used to saying, I am going to do the best I can here. And that may be great. That may be what greatness is somebody doing the best they can at the moment, and it clicks for whatever reason with their talent, with their culture. That's what greatness is. Greatness is not finding your place in this legendary march from, ancient Greece to Western Europe. That's not how it works. Here's the thing about watching childhood favorites that don't age well. They don't age well, and yet they do hold their place for you. Even if all you're doing is saying, wow, I remember when I believed that, or I remember when I wanted that, or whatever it is that you're seeing in that ancient thing. It's really, really valuable to recognize that it's not that you got it wrong then. It's that things change and people change. Hi, Larry. Hello, Lasanda. Nice to see everybody. It's great to have you all here. So here's the thing. Artists, we are constantly working to solve the problem of art. We're trying to figure art out. We have to figure out, it's like, how can I be an artist? Well, I can't be an artist if I haven't figured art out. If I haven't figured out what is good art and what is bad art and what is art that sells and what isn't. And once you've figured that out, you plan your path. You figure out your career moves. And one of the ways we do this is, first of all, we look around and we see what's popular, or if our values are not popularity, if they're what's artistically different or perhaps appreciated. Anyway, what we do then is we also look at the artists who came before us that we admire, and it seems like they had a story, a direction. It's like, oh, they did this to get to that. But here's the thing. I do not know of any artist who had the career they intended when they started. If you look at the paths of these artists and you say, George Lucas started in little art film sci-fi, and then he moved his way through to Star Wars, that wasn't the plan. It wasn't like he knew when he did American Graffiti that he was going to end up there. When the Beatles started out, when Bob Dylan started out, when Billy Wilder started out, it's not like they said, I know where I'm going to go. I don't know of any artist who had a career plan that they actually followed over time. Tarantino now is planning the end of his filmmaking career, but he's doing that because he's only planning 2 or 3 ahead. When he started on number 1, he wasn't saying, I'm going to do 10. He was saying, I'm going to see what happens. And then somewhere around the middle, he's like, you know what, I think this is looking like that. So you don't plan your life. You don't plan your career. What you do is you do the best you can within the reality of the moment. I don't know of anything. I think that the important thing to know is you are going to change and the world is going to change. Those both are going to happen, and they're going to interact in interesting ways. Hello, Doreen. Very nice to meet you. I don't think we've spoken before. How are you? So here's the thing. Because you are going to change and the world is going to change, you can't jump ahead and say, I'm going to change, so I'll figure out what I'm going to change, and then I'm going to go to that. I'm going to go to the end. You can't do that. What you can only do is say, I am going to do what I can right now and not try to over-plan the future. You can plan 2 or 3 steps ahead. You should plan. You should as ideally plan for alternatives. Maybe this will happen. If this doesn't happen, I can do this. If this doesn't happen, I can do that. That's good planning. Planning, I am going to do 10 movies now. One's going to be a Western, one's going to be a submarine film, and I'm going to have them go on these platforms and open in these theaters. That's a bad plan. That is not the way that plans work for artists. Things change. If you have any longevity at all, they especially change. Is it good? Is it bad? Should we fight change? It doesn't matter. It is. It's going to happen. And I think that the important thing you have to do is work in the world you see and feel as best you can in the moment, which really comes down to a sort of, if I'm going to give you a how-to, a useful tip that comes from this observation about change, this is it. And you will have heard me say this before. Do what you can as who you are with what you have right now. That's the artist's creed, as far as I can tell. That is the thing that an artist should keep in mind, because it doesn't matter if something else is a bigger hit than what you want to do. It doesn't matter. You still have to do what you are going to do and see if you can find a place for it. If you decide, I'm going to try and be like that thing that's a hit, for one thing, that's going to change. What's popular, what's selling, it's changing now faster and faster. And so the most important thing that you should be doing is doing what you want and what you can in the moment now. You'll see how that goes as it goes along. Great, thank you. Good to have you here. Thank you. Yes, change. Well, it's interesting because some change is unintentional, some things, and a lot of change is intentional, and good. You should say, like, you know what? I've been doing little indies, and I feel like I want to do something more commercial, and I'm going to try that. Cool. That is a good, deliberate change. It is an intended change. You can do that. On the other hand, you can say, as I did at a certain point in the late 90s, I'm going to do a rom-com. And by the time I was done with it, admittedly, I took a long time, nobody was making rom-coms. Unintentional. Thank you, Doreen. So yeah, I think that the most important thing that you can remember is the only thing that is constant is change, and therefore do what you can as who you are. Do whatever is within your ability and vision. Don't try and be something you're not. Try and just be the thing that you are and can do. With what you have. If you don't have access to $100 million, maybe don't write that $100 million script. Do whatever you can do right now. And then each step, you'll keep moving with the changing landscape. That is the lesson. There is the lesson. So yeah, as I said, I'm also, this has been on my mind partly because I took a couple weeks off, mainly to work on my video, the lesson videos. As I have mentioned, these videos in the first 3 playlists, I am adding to them now every week. I'm trying to do a new one every week. I'm going to try and do that for the next 10 or 12 weeks. The thing about that is that it's somewhat time consuming to shoot and edit those. I've written them. I need to do rewrites, but and so therefore I simply don't have time to do both the live streams and the lesson videos. So I'm trying to sort of put the live streams on hold for a while I catch up on these lesson videos that I've been writing for a year. Try and get them out there so that I also, having done that, can find some time to write my novel, which I want to do, plus live my life, because it's a valuable thing. Living your life, big part of writing. Do not kid yourself. If you put your life off too much, then you get to be an old person and you look back and say, whoa, I kept waiting till I was going to be rich and famous and have eat easy, and then I would have my life. My advice, freebie, don't do that. Therefore, probably I'm certainly going to do this week's live streams. I may do next week's, but then I'm going to stop for probably 6 or more weeks because I'm going to be trying to get these videos done. So that's what's going on here at Writing for Screens Central. And with that, we got 19 people on. Anybody got any questions? We have so we got some Ask Me Anything time. I am more than happy to answer almost anything. So please feel free to type your questions into chat. That's what the rest of this session's going to be for. Wanted to leave some time for Ask Me Anythings. So please ask me almost anything. Otherwise, I'm just gonna rant. I'm just gonna talk about these movies again for a while because Rocky is solid. Change is great. What's more, change not only is change great, and it is, because without change, well, first of all, what would we have? Let's think about this. What would we have if things were not changing? We would just have the same thing over and over again. And how much do we really want that artistically? How much do we really want to see the same thing over and over again? There's a comfort in seeing a little bit of something over and over again. But at a certain point, you're like, what's the new thing? What's the different thing? What's the even if it's just, I like action films, what's the new action film? Cool, you're still going to want that. And in the efforts to make the new thing, each artist is going to say, what can I do that is different, new? And that is change. Oh, look, we got a question. Hi, Inko. How have you dealt with feeling insufficient as a creator in your early years? Good question. Let's see. It's tricky because as a creator, I think that I love creating to the point that if I'm creating something and it's totally incompetent and inaccessible, I'm still having a great time. That's the kind of creator I am. I recognize that I need to work hard to get to where people can understand and enjoy it also, but my frustration was less with my inability than with the world's inability to recognize me. And that is a unique thing to me. Everyone's different. But for me, feeling insufficient as a creator was primarily me feeling, damn, if they would only give me a chance, I would be better. If they would only give me, $20 million to make a movie, I guarantee you I'd figure out how to make a movie. As opposed to, I'd better know how to make a movie before they give me the 20 million. So there's sort of two sides to that question. One is the insufficiency, the frustrations of your situation. How do you deal with that? And the answer is, I always feel scale back. And I hate to say it, but it's this one. Do what you can with what you have. In other words, if the entire world rejects your work and all you can do is write it on notebook paper, then do that. If you need to make, what a blessing now that we have this here internet and these here cameras and mics, and this, you can just make whatever you can make. You can make a little rom-com, you can make a little suspense story, you can make all sorts of stuff just with what you've got right now. You could do it today. That's so cool, and that was not available to me. So what I tended to do was go towards what I could do, which meant like I couldn't make sound films when I was in high school, so I worked in theater because I could do plays in school. So that's the one side of it. But then the other side of this question: how do you deal with feeling insufficient as a creator? As in, I'm not good enough. What I would say is, there's something good in there. Something that you're doing is good. And what you want to do is kind of build from there. Like if all you have is one plank of goodness, you have that you've written a funny scene, or you've written a character who said one good line. That's the first plank of your edifice, of your building, of your creation. And so then you think, well, how can I put one thing with it that will get a little better? A bit of dialogue when I'm not good at dialogue, a bit of description if I'm not good at it. That's how I had to deal with it, because the feeling was, I don't know how to do this well enough. And I did have that feeling. Despite my feeling I'm really cool, I also had the feeling like, it's so frustrating. I know what this should be like, but when I sit down to write it, I can't get it right. The first thing I would say about that is get it as right as you can. That's the trick. It will be better than you think. So dealing with the feeling of insufficiency is just do the good stuff you can do. Don't worry about comparing yourself. Do not compare yourself. You can aspire. You can say, damn, I loved that thing that this other person did. Now, instead of saying, oh, look, compared to them, just say, look at what they did. How can I do a thing that in its way is a thing that's good like that? That's that in its way, which is really, once again, the same message. If all you have is an interesting character and you can write some scenes and dialogue, write that. If you can imagine this thing that's way too expensive but you can't make it, write it anyway. Write it and see what happens when people read it. The way that you deal with feeling like you're not good enough is keep working, because you'll get better. There is never going to be a point at which you are going to be good enough. And what happens, or what can happen, is what happened to me. At a certain point, I did get what I consider good enough at screenwriting. And I started to push into different things. I wanted to write fiction, or there's ways that I began to say, okay, I am going to actually go into an area where I'm not good enough, because I'm already good enough at that one. When you get really good at something, you tend to, if you're creative, you're like, okay, where can I be less good? So that's it. That's my main thought on that. Let me get to Phil J. Any recommendations on how to end an intercut scene? How to end? What to avoid? That's interesting. Well, the thing is, when you're talking about an intercut scene, you're talking about like you've got like two things going on, and they're either independent or like a phone call is an intercut scene, for instance, where people are talking to each other, you're intercutting. Or you've got a situation where you've got two things happening independently and you're cutting back and forth between them. And in that case, what you're really talking about is a sequence. In other words, you have a series of scenes that are really one scene. Their sequence is a series of scenes around one action. What is the main action of that intercutting? Like the obvious intercutting, someone is tied to a train track and a train is coming. So you're cutting back and forth between the people on the train and the person on the train track. So the point of this is, what is the action is either the person on the train track is going to get away, either by saving themselves or being saved, or they're going to get run over. Once you figure out what that action is, you build towards that and you make that the thing, the last thing. Is it that they get away? Then you want that to be the last thing. Although sometimes, though, what's interesting is like the last thing is, they get away and then you end with the people on the train going by and they don't even know they were there. So I think that the answer to ending an intercut scene is know what the intercut scene is about. What its single purpose above all other purposes. There'll be lots of purposes. Everything you do has lots of different things that it's doing, but there's always going to be one that is more important than anything else, and that should guide how you end it. Because that ending should resolve whatever that tension is. If the tension of an intercutting scene is, are they going to meet and fall in love, and then at the end of the intercut they meet, that's the end. If it's that they don't meet and then they're going to meet later, cool, that's the end. You have to figure out what's the point of this sequence. And that's the important thing, is it's a sequence, which sort of brings up the basic concept of, and I discussed the concept of a sequence, think in scenes. In other words, an intercut scene is actually several scenes put together into a large unit, which I call a sequence, in order to distinguish it from a scene. So does that help, Phil? I think that's true. I think creators are our biggest critics. I think they can be, but honestly, some other people can be our biggest critics, and man, do that not fun. Okay. Am I being nostalgic, but there's still old films that seem fresh? Yes and no. Are you being nostalgic? Maybe, I don't know, but that's not important to the question of are there still... seem fresh is always going to be different to everybody. I've been talking to some young people, and I'm recognizing that there's things that were fresh because they were new. And having broken that ground, they were absorbed into the library of possibilities, and therefore they're not as fresh. They simply aren't. What they are, however, is good. You can sometimes watch something and say, I can never know the impact that Elvis Presley had on kids listening to the radio in 1954 or 6 or whatever it was. I'll never quite feel that. I can hear about it and I can respect it. But for me, it will be different things that opened doors for me. Likewise, seeing certain kinds of films. It's funny, just last night I was watching The 400 Blows by Francois Truffaut, his first feature film. Francois Truffaut did a film called The 400 Blows. It was autobiographical. It's very loosely structured. It's a melange of different styles. It goes from weird high comedy to real sort of angsty kid alone on the streets. Anyway, the point is that this movie is honestly not accessible to most people, young people now. But at the time that I saw it, it was mind-blowing. So the answer is that something that somebody could see and get, even though it's not going to blow their mind? Yes, absolutely. You never know what's going to do it. Hello, Gene, and all the writers. Okay, have you within you right now everything you need to deal with whatever life throws at you? Well, yeah, that's a tricky philosophical question. I would say yeah, in the sense that you have everything you need to deal with it. Like, do I personally? I, as much as anyone? Sure. Because this seems like a trick question. No. I mean, within me, I think if you have the interest and the ability to keep your eyes open and see things coming at you as what they are, and to try and deal with them both honestly and emotionally. There's a lot of stuff that you need to, but to deal with whatever life throws at you, I don't know. Like my earthquake preparation, I have a big list of things I'm supposed to do for earthquakes, because now and then, like, I listen to a podcast and it tells you, like, earthquakes are coming, you should be ready. I live in Los Angeles, there's earthquakes, or tornadoes. I'm not prepared. So I don't know, Ron. Ask me more. I'm not sure what I mean. On a second or third draft, do you rewrite scenes or rewrite the entire script? That depends on what it needs. For me, endlessly, it will be the... Hold on. Let me see if I can find this thing. Do I got this thing? Spiral? Do I got the spiral? Yeah, I do. Okay, this is my famous, and I did a video on this called the spiral process. I will try and put a link to that down below. Any video I mentioned of mine, I will try to put a link at the end of this video, about 10 minutes after this video is done. For those who are watching live, I clean up the description and I add the links, so look for that. Anyway, the answer is, I just keep going back at it, and sometimes I'll fix a scene, and sometimes I'll rewrite the entire script. It depends. It depends on what is happening in my abilities at that moment. Okay. Atanu says, I have been trying to write scripts, but every time I write scripts, 75% into the scripts, I end up writing all is lost moment. I don't know whether I'm being... No. Well, the answer is... that maybe that's the story you're telling. That's fine. It's not like that's inherently bad. If you get 75% of the script and then have it all is lost, is actually a good place for it. It's not the only place you can have that, but that doesn't sound like a bad thing. I don't know whether I'm being formulaic or not. You're only being formulaic if it doesn't apply to your story. You know what I would say about that is... script by script, try checking it. Say, like, is this really what we need here? But if you like it, if it's feeling good to the story, do it. And if you do that in every single script, sure, why not? Whatever is your honest feeling of what you think is the most enjoyable, powerful, interesting story, do that. If it happens to be the same formula every time, cool. What's wrong with that? Then you'll be the guy who does that thing. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. And the one thing is about that is that having the all is lost moment, and by the way, all is lost moment is not a trademarked thing. It's not a required thing. What it just means is like at a certain point, sometimes stuff goes really, really bad for your characters. And that tends to happen towards the end because then they have to, because if it happened earlier, either they would have, I think it could be kind of interesting to have it earlier. Some people say it should happen in the middle. It could be cool to have it happen in the first 20 minutes. I don't know. But it doesn't. But usually, because of the sense of roller coaster that we like in scripts, so going up, then you go down, then you go up, and then you go down. And it should get bigger each time, in theory, because you don't want to have your biggest kick happen at the beginning of the story. So if your lowest point is towards the end, then your comeback is going to be very satisfying. Or, if it's a tragedy, your lowest point might actually be the very last thing. Don't know. There's no rule about that. That's the main thing. Do not be afraid of following your instincts. Okay. Hi, Alice Chance. I have a character who is suffering something I've never experienced. Do you feel unqualified? No, and this is interesting. I have been hearing and reading a lot about especially, and I am not making a judgment on whether you are young or older, but especially young people are particularly sensitive for good reasons to not writing about things that they are not qualified to write. Here's my feeling about that. Honestly, everyone is qualified to write about everything because no one is writing about, unless you're just writing pure autobiography, you're always going to be making that leap. You are always going to be making the leap into things that you don't experience personally. And that is why we imagine. That is why we have fiction. And there's nothing wrong with that. What is wrong is if you fall back on cliches or formula or only things you've seen in other stories. Think about that. If you are really putting yourself into that person's shoes and imagining it as you would deal with it. And admittedly, this is currently a very controversial question because I personally believe that if you truthfully imagine a story which is not necessarily, first of all, not ideal, but second of all, may not be common. You are trying to imagine someone's experience, and that experience is not common for the person who you are not, for the type of person, the group of people that you are trying to imagine your way into. I do not believe you are required to be to cover it all. You can just imagine your version. That's all we do ever. Look, I wrote a script. No, I did. It was a rewrite, but I had to write a script about a guy who was a Oklahoma lawyer up against a guy who shot his wife in the head. I know nothing about any of that. I've done nothing about that. I wrote a script about auto race car drivers and in 1905. I do not even know how to drive a car. So my answer is I tried to imagine. I don't know how to drive a car because I grew up in New York City and I have anxiety and it just didn't seem like a good plan. But I know what it's like to be in a moving car. And I thought, what would it be like to be driving this thing and it's a rickety car and it's going 80 miles an hour and there's no windshield because they didn't have windshields back then. And I thought, what's that feel like? And I tried to write down bits and pieces and imaginations. What's it feel like to want something? What's it feel like to... We all have all the feelings. That is my big take on that. We all have all the feelings. So the question is, can you imagine it authentically to your feelings and authentically to your... And you'll have to do some research. Sure, you should research. You should see. I found out a little bit about being a lawyer. Not a lot because the script didn't require any reality. But the question of suffering something that you have never experienced, first of all, do some research. Like I wrote a script about a woman who was suffering from schizophrenia. And I read a phenomenal book called Surviving Schizophrenia, which spent a lot of time maybe 100 pages detailing what the experience of schizophrenia is based in many, many cases. And then I tried to imagine from there. I actually did a pretty good job on that one. People who read it, they felt powerfully connected. Anyway, the answer is you deal with that by trying to not be offensive, not be stereotypical, not be cliched, but imagine. You're allowed to imagine. Hopefully your imagination is not insulting. If it is, you're going to have the consequences of that. But I don't think that you, Alice, you do not seem like someone who is going to be insulting to their characters, and therefore do it. Go with it. Research and imagine. Research and imagine. See how it goes. That's my main feeling about that. I know that there are many layers of social responsibility on that question. My feeling is, personally, and this is just my personal take on this, is I feel like if I am artistically doing the best I can, even if I do it badly, even if I do terrible, terrible faux pas, I can live with that. Does it mean I will not get published or be, attacked? Maybe. You got to try it. You prepare for it and you live with it as best you can. But the most important thing about that situation would be trying to know that you had authentically done your best, and not to say, I got all my ideas about lawyers from movies about lawyers, and I didn't really think about what it's really like to be a lawyer. That would be a problem for me. Okay. It wasn't so much it was an impossible question. It was a possible question. The thing is, it seemed a little bit like you were like, he's going to say he's ready for whatever life's throwing at me, and then I'm going to throw something at him. And it was a little scary. But Ron, it's great. Thank you it was a good question. Avant-garde movement in film is dead? No. I declare no. And I say, if you watch Tar, it's an old avant-garde, but it's an avant-garde. Anyway, that story where you locked. Yes, yeah. He's talking about. There's a video I did called. Let's see. I think I have. Fear of writing. I talked about the fear of writing, which includes the fear that you're not good enough. And I will link to it. Fear of writing. Fear. Spiral seeds. Okay. Sorry about all the noise. Okay. Hi, Virella. I'm glad you're here too. Great. Good. Thank you so much. Thank you. Cool. Excellent. Tell a good story. Yes. It's funny. I was just listening to a podcast, and it was two essayists, Jay Caspian Kang and Roxane Gay, talking about the question of who is allowed to write what stories. And their first take on it was, if it's a good story, if it's a good book, if it's a good movie, you won't notice whether or not the person is from the place that the character is. And I think that's true. The tricky thing comes there is defining good. That's the tricky thing. Because some people feel that good is something that is socially responsible. Some people think that good is something that is stimulating. And some people think that it's good if it is uplifting. There's so many different goods, and they don't all go together. So that's the tricky thing about that. But I do believe that that Gene is onto something, is that one of the things that you can define, that helps you define whether or not you have the right to write anything, is you want to be good. You want to tell a good story. That good story could be dark and depressing, and that's good. Cool. But I'm saying do it because you want to tell a good story, one that you feel authentically you can stand behind. Yeah, I forgot I was on too. Hi, Maisie. It's good to see you. I will be on today, and I'll be on Thursday, and then we will see. I'm figuring it out. Do I have a favorite? I have 100 favorites of everything. Let me just offhand, the one that a bunch of them leaps to mind. Okay, the one that comes to mind is one called here. Let me. Breaking Away. Breaking Away is a coming of age story. It was from the mid 70s, I'm guessing. There we go. Breaking Away. It's about this kid in Indiana who wants to be a bicycle racer, and he so admires the Italian bicycle race team that he insists on speaking with an Italian accent and pretending he's Italian when he is in this Midwestern family. It's really sweet and great. It was a terrific coming of age movie. But there's also one called Racing with the Stars. That was a good one, set in the 1940s. Racing with the Moon. Okay, now, caveat, warning, beware. I have not seen Racing with the Moon in a long time. I will stand by Breaking Away. Let me see. Can I get this to go bigger? Yeah, there we go. Okay, Racing with the Moon. Racing with the Moon. It's set during World War II. Sean Penn's in it. Richard Benjamin directed it. I thought that was a really nice one. There are so many. People should chime in. And obviously the 400 Blows is a good. And these are all very, very different. In some ways, what was coming of age? What's that? The movie about the young woman going to get an abortion. Always, sometimes. No. Yeah, always, sometimes, rarely, never. Anyway, it's a very narrow story. It's just about the weekend in which this young woman and her friend go from New Jersey into New York to get an abortion, and it's a phenomenal coming of age story and phenomenal movie. Very, very, very different than the other ones. These are all very, very different. 400 Blows, which is very, very different. The interesting thing about 400 Blows is 400 Blows was an autobiographical coming of age movie about a 12-year-old boy based on Francois Truffaut, the director. Several years later, he was invited to make a short film set in Paris. And as part of a collection of short films that was going to be one feature. And so he decided to take that same character, Antoine Doinel. Let me see if I can type this in here. The Antoine Doinel films by Okay, the Antoine Doinel films by Truffaut. So he did a sequel where Antoine was a teenager. He was falling in love, and then he did. Antoine gets a job as a private detective in his 20s. Then he gets married. Then he's divorced. So this cycle of films, which is now in a box set on Criterion Collection DVDs or the Criterion Collection streaming service, the Antoine Doinel films. It's a remarkable thing because the same actor played Antoine in these films over the many years, and therefore you have this weird experience of seeing, and you can actually, they used footage from his teenage years and his childhood and stuff, which also inspired Boyhood by Richard Linkletter, which is an astonishing and brilliant movie filmed over 20 years. Yes, Soderbergh's King of the Hill, fabulous, wonderful, based on somebody's memoirs of the Depression. Thank you, Sans Femme. Anyway, so coming of age movies. Damn, I can go for a while. There's so many good ones. Actually, see, now this is interesting. There is a coming of age movie where the woman is in her 60s called, My Name is Doris. Yeah, I think it's My Name is Doris. I think that's it. I think it's called My Name is Doris with Sally Field. And it's she's this crazy old woman. It's this weird comedy, but I would count that as a coming of age movie, and it's fabulous. There's so coming of age. Do we ever stop coming of age? That's some good stuff. I am sure I will think of more and kick myself later. Okay. So the first episode of Game of Thrones. I'll tell you something. If you like the first episode of Game of Thrones production value, wait till you get to the second and third seasons, because they put for all the money they put into the first episode, boy did the budget go up later on. The production value just gets better and better, I gotta say. There are some serious problems with Game of Thrones. Actually, the first season of Game of Thrones is especially tacky. As regards the nudity and prostitution stuff, they were still figuring out what kind of story they were, and they got better about that as it went on. So like you get into the later seasons, it's really good. The first season is completely admirable, but it gets better, and then it falls apart. What are you gonna do? Yes, thank you. Allowed to imagine. That is absolutely the truth. In the setup portion, if inciting incident takes a little longer to come, can it be shown in the beginning right after fade in? Accident or police trust, and then go back? Yes, absolutely. That's a yes or no. yeah, sure. Why not? You are not required, obviously, at this point in screen history, you are not required to tell stories chronologically. You very much you can do. There's also at some point some of these things are actually conventions. At this point, it's pretty familiar to start with some hooky event and then say, 3 weeks earlier. Not a problem. Easy to do. Fair to do. Yes, breaking away. Damn, that's such a good script. Okay, good. Yeah. If we don't have any more, I'm just gonna try. Damn, I'm trying to think of coming of age stories because there are so many good ones, and I just forget. Oh, you know what? There's what was it? It's based in what Maisie Saw. A friend of mine actually produced it. Sorry, it's with Julianne Moore and Alexander Skarsgård. It's really cool. Sorry, I can't remember the title. Yeah. Okay. So here's the deal. Oh, got a question. Hi, Alex. Do you want to riff on why Game of Thrones? Do you have inside information or just observation? Sure. I do not have inside information. Anything I have is coming from the media and the social media and the pile-on of comics. Oh yeah. That Stand By Me is terrific. I would definitely, Doreen, you can add Stand By Me in there. Julia, but it was a writer's story. I don't know that it was, I mean, in a sense, this is the tricky thing. In a sense, all stories are coming of age stories. But Julia, I don't think of as coming of age. The reason I mentioned Doris, My Name is Doris, is because while she is in her 60s, she's very, very immature, and it's about her coming of age at last, too late. Okay, so let's do Game of Thrones. I do not know that much about Game of Thrones, but behind the scenes, I mean. Here's my take. Two things happened that I think. First of all, I don't think I know people, I'm related to some people, who think the last two seasons are an abomination and a horror, and that they totally betrayed everything. I don't think so. I think the last two seasons, I think even the last season, I think even the last episode is mostly spot on. It's good stuff. I felt it was satisfying. I felt it was smart. I felt most of the story's resolutions were good. Here's my problem with Game of Thrones. As I said, my problem for number one is at the beginning, they were thinking they would be trashier. And it shows. There's a certain, they were like on the fence. Do we go like artistic and interesting, or do we do trash? And then they were like, "Oh yeah, let's do artistic." But there's just enough trashiness in the first season or two to make you a little cringe. Cringe a little, actually. The ending, the choice, I'm not going to spoil, but the choice of who ends up as the new, leader of the pack, the new ruler of all things. It's not that the choice was wrong. It's that they just tried to jam it into one scene, and that the explanation, the reasoning that who has the best story, it's a famous speech given by Peter Dinklage, is just terrible. It's self-aggrandizing by the writers who thought that they got all wrapped up in their own wonder, as we're so wonderful as storytellers, and so therefore we think storytelling is the center of all things, and that's just terrible. That's actually, to me, it was embarrassing. However, the choice of who they chose was not bad. They just need to build to it better. They need to spend more time with him in the course of the other seasons to justify what they did. What they did was not wrong. It was just wrongly done. Likewise, Daenerys's turn just wasn't convincing to me. It wasn't that I didn't believe the story. I thought that her story was really, really good and right, and that they had actually built up to that well. You can see the signs of that coming. And I'm sorry, this is going to be very inside, and I'm being very careful not to give away things for those of you who have not watched Game of Thrones and want to, because I think it is worth watching all the way through. However, where Daenerys ends up is clearly marked out through her entire story, and it's believable. I honestly just don't think Emilia Clarke is scary enough. she just seemed sort of nice and cute all the way through. I mean, no matter how brutal she got, she didn't seem scary. It's sort of the reverse of Jack Nicholson in The Shining. In Jack Nicholson in The Shining, the problem with Jack Nicholson in The Shining is from the very first scene, you're like, this guy's nuts. As opposed to, he's supposed to be sort of an average guy who slowly descends into madness. But from the very first scene of the movie, you're like, whoa, yikes, don't let him have a hotel. Anyway, so that's my take on Game of Thrones. All right, so. Okay. What do I really want to know now? Okay. There's a limit for show and don't tell. Yes. Actually, I already did that, I think, didn't I? Show, don't tell. Yeah. Here's the thing about show, don't tell. People don't understand what show, don't tell means. Show, don't tell does not mean don't use dialogue, and it doesn't even mean don't explain. It means you should have things play out. They should be actions. They should not be explained. They should be enacted. That's what show, don't tell means. It does not mean don't use dialogue. It does not mean things have to be visual. Show, don't tell means things should be taken upon as actions of the characters or the story. They should not be explained by people so that you know something without seeing it happen. That's what show, don't tell. And is there a limit? No. When you do that, there's no limit. When you do show, not tell, meaning I don't want to use dialogue, that's terrible. I did a video about dialogue, which sort of gets into that. So watch that. I'll put a link down below. I don't have do I have I don't think I've got. Nope, haven't put the thumbnail up yet. Okay, sorry. Hi, Doxy Loop. Au revoir, les enfants. I have not seen that. I have heard it's great. Thank you, San Fam. I have not seen that. I cannot tell you how much I feel badly that I have not seen that, because I have heard it is fabulous. Okay, Mega Mayo. Assuming I have this correct, subtext and its connection to setups and payoffs are a common storytelling technique used to create a section. Yes. So far, so good. Is there more to that? Because the answer would be yeah. Two things actually about this. Okay, one is, here's the thing. You can have a setup and payoff that is not subtext. Okay? You've sort of, it is absolutely true that setups and payoffs, and I'm discussing them in one of these videos I haven't filmed yet, but basically the idea is setups and payoffs means something's going to happen, that you want something to happen later, like, oh, they're going to blow up the bridge. Well, if you only discover there is a bridge right then, it isn't as satisfying as if, say, in the bridge over the River Kwai, you spend 2 hours building the bridge. So therefore, you're setting up the irony and the pain of this question of should they or should they not blow up the bridge. Setup and payoff means if you're going to have something happen, you have elements of it or the question of it introduced earlier so that they can play into our understanding of the story. That's what setup and payoff is. Subtext means not saying things out in a blunt way. In other words, to say, I'm thinking of going to get lunch, and what you really mean is, we know that every day at a certain lunch hour, this person you want to meet is there. But we set that up earlier, so when they say, I think I'm going to go to get lunch, we know that what they're saying is, oh, I hope I meet that person. That's subtext. Does that make sense, Mega Mayo? Okay. Loved your response. An experience question? Yes. Thank you. Allowed to imagine? Yes. Thank you, Angeli. I appreciate that. Okay. Yes. Goodbye, children. Indeed. I have never seen it. I have heard great. Lillian Hellman asked Ash, how does it feel to be famous writer? He responds, what does it feel to have to? Yes, that is true. It is. It's a great movie. We're talking about the movie Julia. And one of the main characters is Lillian Hellman. It's autobiographical. Yeah, for good reason. I'm not saying Shining wasn't scary. I'm saying Shining was scary from the very first frame, whereas the concept of The Shining is that these people who are relatively ordinary are pulled into extreme supernatural evil. If you read the book, the buried evils in the family are present, but they are covered with a certain amount of ordinariness. And then once they get to the Overlook, it is brought out by the supernatural evil of the hotel itself. But with Jack Nicholson, when he's driving that car, you're like, ah! Anyway, okay. Eureka 85. Thank you. You are welcome. Thank you. That is lovely. I appreciate that. Okay. Yeah. We got. No, it's 6. I'm hoping in the next 6 to 8 weeks to record at least 12 videos. So I'm working on it. Okay, and with that, I think it is time to conclude this. I don't like these videos to go on too long. This one's going on for 1 hour, and that seems enough. So I will be back on Thursday, day after tomorrow, 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. See you then, I hope. Thank you all for being here. And in case you didn't know it, you should go write something.